You're listening to Deep South Dining on MPB Think Radio. Malcolm and Carol are not in studio today, so we can't take your calls. Send any questions or comments to food@mpbonline.org. Today, we're sharing a recent interview with the host of PBS North Carolina's The Key Ingredient, Sheri Castle.
Well, good morning, Carol. How are you? It's good to be here on Deep South Dining.
Good morning, Mal. It's always good to be with you.
Well, thank you so much.
It's good to be your skillet buddy.
Yes. Today we have an award-winning food writer, recipe developer, cooking teacher, storyteller, and host of the Emmy-award-winning cooking show from MPB North Carolina, The Key Ingredient. Welcome back to the show, Sheri Castle.
I'm so happy to be with y'all. Thank you so much for having me back.
We got wind recently that you had been awarded the Ruth Fertel Keeper of the Flame Award for 2024.
By the Southern Foodways Alliance.
By the Southern Foodways Alliance. And that put you back on our radar, and we said, this is a great opportunity to bring Sheri back. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. It was one of the greatest honors of my life. I'm a longtime SFA member, and as I say all the time, some of the finest people I've ever met and some of the most informative things that ever happened to me were rooted in SFA relationships. So to be awarded this gift, I feel like a gift from them really, really touched my heart.
Well, it is just more than a gift. I mean, it is recognition of your years and years of work, and for your contributions to Southern Foodways, Appalachian Foodways, your inimitable curiosity about all things cooking, all kinds of ingredients, for your combining the history of the region. It's your work has spoken to so many people all over the years, and I love it that you say that you've met some of the finest people there, because you met Malcolm and me at Southern Foodways.
Absolutely. If that's not evidence of my point, I don't know what is.
Yeah, Sheri, you wear so many hats, but one of my favorite hats that you wear is as a cookbook author. And I was so surprised. I pulled out my copy of the new Southern Garden Cookbook and was shocked to learn that it was done in 2011. It seems like yesterday.
That? Another year it'll be able to get its driver's license. I mean, I cannot believe that book has been around that long, because that is 1,000,000 years old in cookbook years.
In cookbook years, it is. And I wanted you to talk to us, because you did cookbooks for other people and what it was like to do this magnificent book.
Well, that book did come out in April of 2011. I worked on it for a couple of years before that. And even though I had either as a ghostwriter or a collaborator or a consultant helped other people write their books, it was the first one that was ever going to have my name on the cover. And I'll be honest with you, I figured it would be the only one I was ever going to get to do. So I said everything I could think of all at one time.
And you said a lot.
I said a lot. And it's a huge book by cookbook standards. But it also, despite all the others that did come along later, will remain my favorite forever, because I really think it sounds like me. I think that if it met my intention that it would be a book that people actually used, that it would be on their kitchen counter more than just on their bookshelf or their coffee table. And I got to tell a lot of stories, because that's what fascinates me about food. It's what fascinates all three of us about food. Is it's not just something to eat. It can be a real statement on who we are and what we think and where we live and all of those things. So it's I'm still proud of that book, very proud of it.
Malcolm and I were talking on a show, one of our shows recently, about books that just become part of your library. They're not in cookbook years. Everything's just a few years, but we're talking about Ann Burns' book on Southern baking, which is going to be one of those on the reference shelf for years to come. And that is how I feel about the new Southern Garden Cookbook. As a reference, it's timeless. And I'm showing it to all the people. We also are on YouTube, so I'm showing.
We're showing our TV.
My well-worn book.
So before we begin to roll tape, imaginary tape, we were talking a little bit about the disaster that occurred in North Carolina, Tennessee, and that part of the world. But you were, in doing so, you were giving us an update as a North Carolinian on how things were coming along. But you began to talk about where you grew up, your grandparents' land. Take us back to where you actually, where you were born and raised in that life.
Yeah, well, right in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'm from Watauga County. The county seat is Boone, North Carolina. Appalachian State University is there. Now, when I was growing up, it was not a college town. It was a tiny town that had a college in it. It was different. But Watauga is where Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina come together in the northwest corner. And my family on both sides goes back generations. It is definitely where I am from, and even though I've not actually hung my hat there in a while, it is home. It will always be home for me, and where I hope to run out the clock someday.
And where is home? Where do you hang your hat?
I live just on the edge of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, another famous university town. I'm about 5 miles on the outside of town, and since I came down off the mountain to go to college about 1,000 years ago, I have lived somewhere in the vicinity of Chapel Hill ever since. But I go up home whenever I can, at least once a month.
And can you pinpoint how your career began in this world of storytelling and writing and teaching and all that you do and TV work?
It was a complete accident. I've always said that, thank goodness, naivete has served me better than ambition, because I would have had no idea how to do any of this. But I was trained as a writer. That's what I studied in college. If you had asked me in high school what my career goal was, it would have been to be a beloved college professor who, taught magnificent classes through the year and wrote award-winning novels during the off season. That didn't happen quite that way, but I did work as a professional writer in other industries, and obviously continue to do that with food writing. But what I did, the through line was, I have always been obsessed with cooking. I wrote my very first recipe in my own words when I was 4 years old, and mailed it to a TV show. So I was always the friend who cooked in high school. I was the friend that people were excited when I worked with them that I was going to have people over, or what I was going to bring to the office potluck. And I made the bold, somewhat foolish at the time, decision to leave the corporate world in the late 90s and try to be a professional cooking teacher. That's what I did first, because I loved explaining things. I loved teaching things. And I did that exclusively for a while. And then one day, a woman attended one of my cooking classes, which were always on Sunday afternoons. And on Monday, she called me and she said, "I really had a good time. You seem to have a way with words. Have you ever done any writing?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, would you like to write a piece for us about something related to Christmas dinner? We'll pay you $25. I'm like, "Sure."
Oh, yeah.
And I did that. Yeah, $25. That would have been in about 1999-ish, maybe. And based on the success of that column, it ran in one of those weekly arts newspapers, that communities have,
Yes.
What's on at the movies, who's playing live music, an arts and culture thing. And based on that, I did a column for them for close to 2 years, and other writing opportunities popped up. And at first, I was trying to play career whack-a-mole with them. It's like, don't want to do that, don't want to do that. And then, sense came over me, better sense. It's like, if I can do more than one thing related to food, let's do it. So the writing led to helping people with their cookbooks. It led to magazine work. It eventually led to my own cookbooks and other magazine columns and so forth. And go ahead another 20 years, and suddenly I get this unexpected opportunity to have a television show on PBS, no less. It was June of 2020, a very dark and bleak and scary time for all of us, and I was sitting on my sofa feeling because I was the most unemployed I'd been since I was 14 years old, because nobody was doing food events at that time. And I got a phone call, and I thought, I may get a pretty good consulting gig out of this in the fall when this is over, back when we thought that it was going to be over in the fall. And they're like, and we want to do something, a food-based show, more or less based in North Carolina. And we would like for you to be the host and the producer. And so next thing I know, I have this TV show, which is the most unexpected and yet probably the most gratifying thing I've ever done, because it is a way to tell the food stories that I'm obsessed with, that I believe actually unite us in many ways to a wider audience. So here we, like I said, I just sort of stumbled into things and somehow have continued to stumble forward instead of falling backwards more often than not.
Well, Malcolm and I both really like the show, and just
great.
A few of the things that I really like. First of all, I like the length of it. I mean, it's like a 30-minute, 25-minute show, but I really feel like in that time you are a great explainer.
Thank you.
It doesn't feel feel rushed at all.
No.
But it's just the right amount of time, and you do things thoroughly. You're not trying to do 20 things in one session.
Yeah, and a
well,
great example.
I appreciate that, because it does. We do cram an awful lot in those 26 minutes.
It feels thorough.
Yeah, a great example was the episode with the tomato seed guru.
Yes.
And I thought, how is she going to wrap this up? Because this guy began to explain how to plant seeds and the whole process. And I thought, this guy, I don't know how she's going to wrap him up. But I mean, just as he got to the place where the seeds were in the little containers and the plastic was applied, and you said, oh, like a greenhouse. And then it was like, and that's how you plant tomatoes. It was beautiful.
Well, thank you. Sometimes those are happy accidents, but I think I don't know if it's just me or my family or being from mountains or something, but we can talk to a fence post and get a good time out of it. I really go into these. We don't rehearse. We don't have a script. I'm just hanging out and chatting with people and asking things that I'm curious about, with the hopes that the viewers will also be curious, and it works out, and we're very lucky about that.
Well, I really loved the episode with John Fleer on this season.
Yes.
What was it called? Something about mushrooms?
It was about mushrooms. So
but the name of it was
the recipe he picked, rather, that our good buddy Fleer picked, was called Merkel.
Merkel pie.
And even as a lifelong mountain person, I had never heard that particular nickname for morel mushrooms, which is, a very popular, delicious mushroom that people forage in the spring. And when he was the force and the brilliant chef at Blackberry Farm, one of his kitchen workers made him this recipe that was from his family. They're in the mountains of East Tennessee, and it's essentially a shepherd's pie, but instead of ground beef, it's these beautifully cooked mushrooms, morels, with a mashed potato crust on the top, and it was wonderful. Wow. It taught me something I had never had not known that word or had that dish, and it's that sense of place that a good recipe will give you, that like a culinary GPS. You take a bite and you know where you are.
Well, you and John Fleer have both done so much to promote Appalachian cooking and to help people discover it. And John was at Blackberry Farm for many years, and with his Foothills cuisine, brought that to the table, and now as a restaurant owner in Asheville. And it just made me so happy to see the two of you, who probably know as much or more about Appalachian food than most chefs in North Carolina, standing there together and doing this, and what a marvelous contribution both of you've made.
Well, thank you. All of the cook-alongs are fun for me, but some of them are truly joyful. And to get to hang out with my buddy John Fleer, who I adore as a person, admire deeply for all he's done for Appalachian food, all of his good works in the community, the Equal Plates Project, all the things that he does. Plus, we're genuine friends. I wish you all could have seen, because we were actually at his house for about 5 or 6 hours to edit down to those 5 or 6 delicious minutes. The outtakes were priceless. I mean, we just cut a fool and had the best old time. And I think that the joy in the process of what we're doing, our deep affection for the land and the place and the mountains and those people, I think that comes through in what we wound up doing, because we had a wonderful time together.
Well, now I remember the name of the episode that I was searching for. It was Mushrooms Are Having a Moment.
Mushrooms are having a moment. You know, they've always been here. They're older than humanity. But in recent years, people are discovering mushrooms. You know, we're foraging a little more. We're finding more beautifully farmed mushrooms in our stores and in our farmers markets. We're discovering how good they are for us, how versatile. Mushrooms are definitely having a moment.
We'll be right back with more from our conversation with Sheri Castle on Deep South Dining. You're listening to Deep South Dining on MPB Think Radio. Malcolm and Carol are not in studio today, so we can't take your calls. Send any questions or comments to food@mpbonline.org. We're back with more of our recent conversation with Sheri Castle.
So, the TV show, The Key Ingredient, is this the third season that you're in?
Yes, it is. The way we count them at and I'm not a PBS North Carolina employee. I do the show for them, but it is produced and distributed by PBS North Carolina. The way we count it, it's season 3, but the way that it is presented to the United States through distribution, it's season 2, because they combined our first 2 as a bundle and then our third one as a standalone. So by my count, it's 3, but for some people, it's 2.
Okay. And Key Ingredient airs on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. on MPB television, and MPB sustainers can watch anytime on PBS Passport. So for those of us who are local, who are listeners, of course, we think our listeners are global, and we know that they are.
Sheri, our listeners are now global.
I love that. I love that. You know, the show can be too. Streaming is a wonderful thing for getting the word out, literally.
Well, and you're spreading the gospel of Appalachia all over the world, too. I can tell you that many people here have not heard of ramps. Mm-hmm. And, the episode where, you actually cut and hunted ramps, and John Flair had those in his dish. I mean, you're teaching us a lot about ingredients.
Well, I'm hoping to, because, occasionally we will do something very specific like ramps or something, but generally I'm trying to pick ingredients that if you may not be able to find it in exactly the form that we did, but there's going to be something equivalent wherever our viewers are across the country or around the world. And because I want people to give more thought to where things come from and to maybe explore their own backyard rather than just the one neon lit aisle of their grocery store. And I understand that not everyone has the same access and that there's all sorts of, issues tied up in that, but I do believe there's lots of good local food to be found, and I want to make people curious and enthusiastic about that.
What would you say are some good substitutes for ramps if someone wanted to make a ramp dish without?
Well, I would mix a combination of green onions or scallions with a little bit of garlic. Because, to hear the folklore behind ramps, you would think it was the most pungent thing in the world, that the paint will slide off the walls and everything. It's really not that pungent. It is in the allium family, which is the onion family, more or less. And there is a bit of garlic smokiness to it, but it will not make your eyes water. So I would do a cross between scallions with a little good fresh garlic put
Right.
in.
Right.
You heard it here on Deep South Dining
Indeed,
now.
you did.
You know, one of the comments from that show, which I highly recommend to anybody, you were talking about, foraging for ramps and for morels, and you said ingredients that grow at the same time, that appear like the morels and at the same time, naturally should go well together. Nature gave them to us at exactly the same time. And it was just so beautiful to see this skillet full of mushrooms and other wild greens. And what a great point.
Well, and it is true because I understand that some people, depending on their comfort level of cooking or even as curious eaters, sometimes don't really know where to begin with maybe pairing flavors or making substitutions. So that little adage, what grows together goes together, can serve you year round. I mean, think about basil and tomatoes and
Right.
ramps and morels, or sweet potatoes and pecans. There is a seasonality to things, and Mother Nature is doing her dead level best to make us pay attention and take advantage of that. And it's a really pretty simple starting point for putting things together.
Okay, Malcolm, forevermore we will remember what grows together goes together.
And I loved
We all
all
need
three of
t-shirts,
those.
don't we?
Great. All three of those examples: basil and tomatoes, pecans,
And sweet potatoes.
sweet potatoes. And there, what was the third one? That was another
The
good
Ramps and morel
Ramps and morels.
mushrooms.
Of course, that's what led us to this. So, Sheri, I'm curious about your thought about North Carolina and North Carolina's place in the Southern food canon and the country and the globe, because you live and work and sort of represent North Carolina. Where is North Carolina's place? What is unique and what is important about North Carolina and the cuisine and the foods there?
Well, North Carolina is a larger state than a lot of people realize. If you start out on the Outer Banks, our storied barrier islands out on the Atlantic Ocean, one of the first places you hit, if you leave and come toward North America, one of the first places you're going to get to are our Outer Banks, and go all the way to the tip far end of the Blue Ridge Mountains where I'm from, that is about a 17-hour drive. It is a long way. So the state's larger than you think. It also is in some ways three states, or at least three very distinct geological regions in one. You've got the mountains,
Right.
and as we know, our Appalachian Mountains, although they can appear to be in the American South on a map, we're really not from around here because of the elevation and the different climate and so forth. That part of North Carolina actually has a growing season and a tradition that's much more like New England. And then you've got the coastal area. You've got all the fishing. You've got all the things that are down there, that, the intercoastal waterways, the ocean and the Outer Banks and so forth. And so that's very coastal, like you might get in Florida or the low country of Georgia and South Carolina, or even part of the Gulf Coast. And then you've got the middle, what we often call the Piedmont or the Sandhills. And that's completely different from both the mountains and the ocean. So even though collectively North Carolina's one state, it's really a number of different smaller growing zones that are very different from one another. And because of that, we have a lot of different things that we can contribute to the lexicon of what is Southern and even American. And there are people in North Carolina that are very proud of their foodways and have no idea what people on the other part of the state are doing. So I think that we've got those regions and those identities and those practices and ways. And then also, because of our universities and our high-tech sector and so forth, we have a lot of folks moving to North Carolina. I think it's been in the top 5 states for people moving from elsewhere in recent years, both for jobs or to retire here for our comparatively milder climate, certainly milder than snowbird, than snowy country, and not quite as deeply hot and humid as some of the other parts of the South. We're sort of a temperate zone in many ways, that we have our ways that we've had, and then we've got the new ways that people that are choosing to move here are bringing. And it's a cliche, but it's true. We're kind of a melting pot of things. We're having things that are coming together, and then we have those strong roots that we're still persevering with. I believe that hanging on to our local food traditions, whether we're in North Carolina or Mississippi or Utah, whatever, I think that there is great power and value in traditions and in local flavors and local cultivars of things. Your kind of field pea you're going to find, or your kind of heirloom apple you're going to find. But we also need to understand that there will always be evolving ways for people to use those local ingredients in those local ways. And to me, that's where kind of the beauty is for people that can shine fresh light on things we have always eaten. To me, that's just the genius of where we can be on a good day with Southern food and with American food.
Well, that is, a great example of what you're talking about is one of your recent shows that was called Turning Over a New Collard Leaf, where you actually take, the southern collard green and you're putting it with curry, a green curry.
Yeah, with a coconut green curry thing. Exactly. And, when I try to give all the recipes in the show careful consideration, but on some things where you have something as ubiquitous as a collard, people have very strong feelings about collards. Either this is the only way to make them, or you could not pay me to eat one. I wanted to give people a fresh way of considering something that is, we were just cooking collards, but we weren't cooking them in pot liquor. Not that I don't love pot liquor. This is not denigrating pot liquor. But to do something quick in a pan with coconut milk and green curry and toasted spices, that could be a real aha moment for some people that will get them to try something that they thought they had written off.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, let's talk about barbecue.
Can't we just talk about religion and politics instead?
Well,
It'll be less controversial.
It's coming. It's coming.
When she was talking about those regions, you were just kind of in your mind.
We're going to talk about barbecue in a minute. So North Carolina has a distinctive barbecue style, as does Alabama and parts of Tennessee and Texas and South Carolina, and there's different kinds of sauces and stuff. So make the case for North Carolina barbecue and where you think it lives.
I have a hat. Had I known, I could have had my hat on. It is a drawing of the outline of the shape of North Carolina with a diagonal slash right in the middle. And because Eastern North Carolina barbecue has a very distinctive saucing or mopping style, and then there's Western. Very broadly speaking, well, first of all, let's start about what it has in common. Okay. North Carolina barbecue is pork barbecue. It's not going to be beef. It's not going to be mutton. It's not even the glorious chicken of North Alabama. It is a pork-based thing, and it is generally whole hog barbecue. It's not just the hams like you get in, East Tennessee and so forth. But in the eastern part of the state, any saucing is a very peppery, very bold and pungent vinegar-based mop and sauce. On the other side of that slash, Western North Carolina, again, a kind of a bold sauce, but has some element of tomato in it, often some ketchup for a tiny bit of balancing sweetness. And people tend to be imprinted in their youth liking one kind or the other, and there are people that will happily accept both, and there are some people's like, no, that's just not how it's made. And now here's the odd thing, even as a lifelong North Carolinian, because my family lived right on the North Carolina-Tennessee state line. To tell you how much my grandparents' house was in North Carolina, and just about all their cows lived in Tennessee. It literally, the state line was right at the top of the hill behind the house. We would go to East Tennessee for barbecue because that was a closer drive for us. So I didn't really get into the whole nitty gritty of North Carolina barbecue till I came to college and attended a pig picking. So I'm a little more ecumenical in my barbecue than some people, but that's for our barbecue. Always pig, almost always whole hog, either vinegar based or that vinegary sauce mitigated, balanced with a little bit of tomato.
Well, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in that because
Let's
I
hear
went to
it.
college right at the South Carolina, North Carolina border. Well, in Spartanburg, about 20 miles in. I was forever imprinted with mustard sauce.
Mustard sauce. I knew you were going to say that because
I
Yeah.
love it.
South Carolinians, I have said with great affection, and a little tongue in cheek, but not entirely, they put mustard in their Cheerios. They will put yellow mustard in their potato salad, their deviled eggs, their barbecue sauce.
You betcha.
And again, I have had really good mustard-based barbecue sauce, but if I were to rank order them, it would not be at the top of my list. When I go to other places, I try to go to a grocery store or a farmer's market. I think that's how you really know what's going on in a place, is to see where they're buying their groceries. And there is this phenomenon where they call something Carolina, which is a huge, pretty useless term because there's 2 states and different regions within them and so forth. But I have found that on the national grocery store shelf, something called Carolina barbecue sauce almost always has some element of mustard in it.
Quick round robin here on barbecue, and then we'll leave it alone. Slaw on your sandwich or not?
Yes, I want a little slaw on my sandwich, but I don't want the same slaw on all my sandwiches. If I am in eastern North Carolina with the vinegary stuff, I want what we call barbecue slaw, which is vinegary also. And then if I'm in other places, I want a more creamy, milder mayonnaise-based slaw. And you got to kind of, because one is very creamy and subduing, shall we say, and one is very pungent and uplifting, shall we say.
Right.
And you got to match that to what's going on with the barbecue. Because some things it's like sometimes we want a little sour cream on our chili, and sometimes we want a little hot sauce on our chili. You got to peg what the function of that slaw is to what is going on the rest of the sandwich. And it always must be pretty dang flimsy white bread, whether it's a bun or whether it is, light bread out of a loaf. The bread should be there as an edible finger bowl. It should mean you are not literally eating barbecue with your hands, but it should not be a point of conversation or really noticeable in any way.
Okay.
You know, the East Carolina slaw that you're talking about reminds me the first time I had a Vietnamese a banh mi. Actually, Malcolm, I think you introduced me to that. Was it the bakery down on
La Bakery?
La Bakery down
In
on the
Biloxi.
and they use a vinegar, slaw with the carrots. And when I tasted that, because you're right, it uplifts it, but it's very similar to me. I mean, what it does for the meat, which the pork that they use, lifts it right up.
Yeah, and we love a uplifting experience.
Yes, we do.
Okay, one more. Chopped or pulled?
If I am eating a sandwich, I like some chopped. If I am eating plate barbecue, that long, porky, tender shoelace pull off of a pig picking is a fine thing, but it's very hard to navigate on a sandwich.
Great. And then finally on this round robin, about religion, what is your mayonnaise of choice?
Okay.
Don't step off into it here.
Yeah, and I put. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually go on record saying this. I put Hellman's on my sandwiches, and I put Duke's in my recipes.
I saw
because
you put
I think
Duke's.
they have a different flavor profile. I think they even have a slightly different texture, and I think that is the highest calling for each one.
That's
Malcolm,
that is the most succinct way I've ever heard it put.
After all the years
of
we
bickering.
have been bickering about this. I mean, Sheri split.
She set us straight. She set us straight here.
They
both have a place.
She is. But let me ask you, Sheri.
Mm-hmm.
Does Hellman's have a football bowl like the
No,
Duke's
no.
bowl? I rest my case.
They
I
do
rest
not.
my case.
Nor do they have, to my knowledge, their own cookbook, their
No.
own merch.
We don't have our own
any of
swag.
that.
No.
Yeah.
And it's made in New Jersey, but that's okay.
And they've changed the recipe.
They've changed the recipe, which makes it even more
I knew you
complicated.
could not leave this show without asking her about mayonnaise.
I know.
Deep South Dining will be right back. You're listening to Deep South Dining on MPB Think Radio. Malcolm and Carol are not in studio today, so we can't take your calls. Send any questions or comments to food@mpbonline.org. Here's the last segment of Malcolm and Carol's recent conversation with the host of PBS North Carolina's The Key Ingredient, Sheri Castle.
All right, question about your TV show, Key Ingredient, that I'm dying to know. When you are planning the next show, the next series, do you collaborate with someone, or are you having to come up with all these ideas, all these guests, all of these recipes? How does this work?
Well, definitely. The topics are mine. I get to pick. We do 8 a season. I get to pick those 8. I will tell you that I am constrained. I'm provided opportunity. I'm not constrained. Provided opportunity that I have to find ingredients that we can hopefully shoot in the zone, in the amount of time that we have to shoot. And sometimes that's pretty abbreviated, and to find 8 ingredients that I can tell their story somewhat adequately in the number of months we have to shoot. Like, I would love to do pecans. That has never worked out on our shooting schedule. There have been a few others, but by and large, despite those constraints, I get to pick what the 8 ingredients are. All of the food choices where I'm cooking, my 2 recipes and my Sheri Says tip, 100% me. I am there as their culinary expert. Bless them. But I am there, and so I get to pick my recipes. Most of the guests are people with whom I have a relationship, or I have found in some way. They're, friends I've had for a long time, someone I've met at a food event, somebody I've researched and like, oh, that's who I want to talk to about this. There have been a few times that we have had that someone at PBS has picked the guest because they have a relationship with that person. Sometimes because they have B-roll of that person, and we can get the episode made. But on the balance, my guests are people with whom I believe I'm going to have a good conversation based on past history or my own curiosity.
Is it your kitchen that you primarily use?
No, my kitchen is about the size of a card table, so that we cannot get the whole crew and everything. Each of the first season, we used a restaurant, small restaurant kitchen, not a commercial kitchen. They had a home kitchen where they were doing demos that was closed because of COVID, because we were shooting that during COVID under strict rules, and there could not be more than 5 of us by law in the square footage. So that was very singular, and that's where we got our start. The second year, I found a house on VRBO that I did some cyber sleuthing and realized that this house, where it was, we contacted the people. I literally went to their door. I borrowed my friend's dog, so I would just look like a nice lady out walking her dog, and went and rang the doorbell and said, blah, 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 I have a TV show, and could we maybe use your house? And these people lived in their home, one home half the year and another home half the year. So that worked really well, and we were able to go in and set up. This last year, someone else found the house that we used, but every year our crew gets bigger. And when we're all there, when everybody's there, there are like 19 or 20 of us. So it takes quite a kitchen that can accommodate that much hardware and that many people. So they have all been home kitchens, but none of them have been my home.
Well, John Fleer sure looks like he has a very nice kitchen.
Oh, it was perfect. It really was. Because ideally, it is a kitchen that has a cooktop and an island, so I and my guests can stand on one side and look out into the world with enough depth on the other side that the entire crew can set up, and that there's either there's something good behind us. We have to put up light structures and all. It is people would be stunned at what it takes to set up these kitchens to do that, or about to do anything, because I think the show sincerely has we just showed up and cooked together and so forth. But Dolly Parton has this wonderful saying, as Dolly does, it takes a whole lot of money to look this cheap. It takes an awful lot of work to look like we just showed up and
just hanging out and using someone's
yeah.
smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So your crew is 20 people.
When we are doing my kitchen things, it's that big. When we're on the road, it is usually 5 people.
So when you go to the farmer's market, it's 5 people.
When we go to the farmer's market, it's actually for something where I'm doing a walk and talk, when I'm literally on the hoof moving around, it's 2 or 3. Because we used to try to do it with one camera, and this is getting technical, but it's true. We found that the audio was not good. We had to add a sound person.
Yep.
So that can be as few as 2 crew plus me. And then, yeah, that's probably our skeleton crew would be 2 people plus me.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, what's next, Sheri? Are you starting another book, or?
Well, much to the consternation of my beloved literary agent, I have not started another book, but I also realize that if I have the great good fortune for the show to be renewed for a 4th season, I have simply got to write another book about that. I love writing books, but I also said after my last one, which was in 2019, I was never going to do another one. I was a little bit burned out. But I realized that the gift of the opportunity of this show is a platform that would really lend itself to another book. So we shall see. We shall see. I write them in my head all the time. I just never quite get them on paper.
I just come up with great titles.
Me too. Yeah, I love a good title. So, Mal, if you've got any good titles floating around you want to share,
I'll send them to you.
Not haiku, but microfiction that's like 1 or 2 sentences. If I could do a food book that was just a culinary microfiction that was true,
I like
so that would be
sounds good.
Micro nonfiction based on food. That's my calling.
That's great. Well, it is the holidays, and Carol and I love to talk to our listeners about getting ready for the big meal. We had a Thanksgiving countdown, and now it's Christmas, New Year's. Talk to us a little bit about preparing, cooking, decorating for the holidays.
And what's on your table?
Well, it has changed over the years as the configuration of my family has changed. But there are a couple of things that I make every year, even now. We'll start first thing in the morning. And that is generally on Christmas Day. Now, my grown daughter, and she lives in another country, but she comes home for Christmas every year. And I make biscuits and sausage gravy. And I make a hash brown casserole. I mean, in all its glory, with the hash browns and all the good stuff in it, and the cornflake crust on top. And for as long as I'm able, there will be gravy and biscuits, and there will be hash brown casserole on my Christmas morning. Mm-hmm. And then I used to, for years, do a great big spread with like the beef tenderloin and a béarnaise sauce. I'll put a pin in that and come back to that in a minute, with all the trimmings. And now that it's just Lily and me, we tend to do more of a grazing thing. I make sure that we have beautiful cheeses and great fruit and some sweets. I still make the beloved molten chocolate cakes, that were really in the 90s. That should still be in it. When you put your fork in it, the molten melted chocolate comes out. I do that every year. So, and then I have the candies and cookies that my grandmother made. I will still make those. But I don't do the whole beef tenderloin thing anymore. We're more
I
brazen.
was just going to ask that. Divinity.
Although, this is true. I cooked dinner for 50 people last night. for a friend. It was their office party, and I made beef tenderloin with all the sauces. People were ecstatic because that still feels so special. It has that kind of once a year investment in the piece of meat feeling, and they were ecstatic. So I still stand behind that kind of cooking. I just don't do it for two people because that is a food of big table, not two people.
Now back to the candies. Both of us were wondering if you made Divinity.
I personally do not make Divinity because that is a candy I was not raised on. I have made it, but it is not in my personal repertoire because it was not one of the candies of my youth. 3 things I make every year, and tonight I've got to make 200 portions of this first one because I have a gig tomorrow where I've got to take snack. There is this toffee, for lack of a better word, that I have always made since I was a kid that has a secret ingredient in it that most people cannot identify. I can't wait to hear if y'all have ever heard of this. You literally line a baking tray, a baking pan, with saltine crackers.
Yes.
And you make a brown sugar butter syrup that you pour over the crackers and put in the oven until it caramelizes. Then you take it out and you sprinkle bittersweet chocolate and let that melt and spread it. And then on top of that melted chocolate, you put chopped nuts. I usually use pecans. And when all that settles, it breaks into these shards of this caramelly, a little bit of salt from those crackers, the bittersweet chocolate, and the pecans into some of the best fake toffee I've ever had.
Wow.
And nobody can guess there's a saltine cracker in it. But
I have had that.
I bet
have
my
not
lunch money on
thought
it.
of
It's
it
fantastic.
in years, but that is absolutely divine.
Mm.
But Malcolm, I'm
Absolutely divine.
still hoping somebody's going to make the two of us some Divinity.
Yeah,
Eventually.
well, because Divinity is a labor of love.
It is.
And you what I think about when I think about something with that level of prowess, of artistry, with sugar and temperature and all, we have fancy ovens and thermometers. Think of the cooks that were at a wood stove.
Unbelievable.
I know it.
Making
Unbelievable.
that with perfection. I am awestruck by people that pulled that kind of candy off without all of our cushy conveniences.
Yes, I'm awestruck as well. And where we live is like a terrarium. I mean, the humidity here, and anyone that can work with meringue in the deep south,
Exactly.
you know,
And
my hat's
make
off
that-
to them.
And make caramel cake frosting, which is the most difficult thing on planet Earth. Nuclear fusion, no problem. Caramel frosting will take the strongest to their knees, you know? I'm going to tell this on myself. I had the audacity to try to make a caramel cake in a cooking class one time. Not only was that foolish from the get-go, it thunderstormed. I mean, we knew it was the kiss of death, but I had 50 people waiting, you know, and there was no backing out at that point. So what I did is I cut, because my cake layers were good. My frosting wouldn't set up. It never went beyond liquid. We cut that cake into little cubes and put them in cute little shot glasses and drizzled that hot, delicious, but totally failed frosting over the top and called it trifle.
There you go.
I love it.
Never defeated.
Never defeated.
Never. Okay, because we're just rolling tape here, is there anything you'd like to share with us, tell us about that maybe we don't know, that it's something that's really special to you that you're working on, or
That
not?
you'd like our listeners to know?
Well, what I would like for them to know is that I believe that each and every one of us has a food story or a catalog of food stories, that I want people to value their family. And it doesn't have to be a past tradition. It can be a tradition that they want to launch, because there is no day too late to launch a new tradition. So we always think that those can go backwards. They can also go forward, and to give value to that. And it can be a recipe, it can be a practice, it can be your favorite brand of mayonnaise, it can be your whatever it is. To document that and to pass that along through storytelling, through jotting a note down, through whatever, because our foodways tell a lot about who we are, where we came from, who we hope to be someday, and it's very easy to let them get lost. And when the last person who can remember how something tasted, the last person with a taste memory, is gone, you cannot recreate that history anymore. And I think that a lot of people think that, oh, I could never write a cookbook, or I don't cook, or I don't. We all have a food story, and sometimes that story is the worst thing your family ever made instead of the best thing. That doesn't mean it doesn't have value, and that we all deserve to have a personal plate of truth.
I love it. Amen, sister. All right, the 2024 Ruth Fertel Keeper of the Flame Award winner from the Southern Foodways Alliance, Sheri Castle, we thank you from the bottom of our heart for joining us today, and we are always proud to call you our friend.
I'm proud to be amongst you. I've had the best time, and let's do it again one of these days, all right?
Absolutely. We'll wait for that next book or whatever you come up with next, and we'll have you on once more.
All right. That could be my tipping point to get me to do one.
Thank you, Sheri.
Thanks
Thank you
so
much, y'all. It was really a lot of fun.
Deep South Dining is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting's Think Radio. We are funded by the generous contributions from listeners like yourself, and we thank you. Our show is produced by Marissa Vaughn. For our special guest, Sheri Castle, and my co-host, Carol Palmer, I am Malcolm White, asking you now to stay tuned for Marshall Ramsey's program, Now You're Talking, followed by Southern Remedy at 11, and we ask that you join us next Monday or next Sunday morning at 9 for more Deep South Dining heard here on MPB Think Radio.